To the world, 22-year-old Layla Rahmani was the perfect wife. Behind penthouse walls, she risked everything for a forbidden love that could destroy an empire. But when their secret affair crashed into one of Dubai's most powerful men, obsession would ignite a chain of betrayal, and a single night of violence would leave 2 members of the dynasty dead. Don't miss real stories that reveal what luxury truly hides. Subscribe, join, and never blink through the world's darkest true crimes. The air inside the Rahmani Al Fayed penthouse was always cool, filtered, and faintly perfumed with imported gardenias, an artificial oasis high above Dubai's desert heat and chaos. Layla stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the sun sinking behind a sea of shimmering towers. From here, the city looked like a treasure chest: gold, glass, movement, and promise. Her phone vibrated in her palm. She turned it over, half hoping for an escape, half expecting disaster. On social media, Layla was a modern miracle, a girl plucked from obscurity, made global by a tech startup IPO, then elevated even further by her marriage to Dubai's most ruthless construction king. Photos of rooftop galas, private jets, sunrise yoga on hotel balconies. Everything is flawless as an oil painting. Yet inside, in silence, she felt all the edges: expectations, alliances, the transactional love she'd been bartered into. She and Omar Al Fayed were perfect for each other. If by perfect you meant untouchable, locked together, golden prisoners of their own deal. Tonight, another party was ending. Guests drifted out. Old men trading business cards, jewel-draped women whispering beneath veils. Omar enjoyed his throne at the head of the room, Spartan and composed, gray just beginning to thread through his beard. "We made a good impression," he'd say, quietly triumphant, as if she was a cherished possession finally put to proper use. Layla only nodded, lips tight, stomach churning. But it wasn't her husband, or his stares, that made her hands tremble as she undid her earrings after the guests were gone. It was the glance that lingered across the marble foyer. Kareem, Omar's 19-year-old son. Sensitive, restless, denim-clad amidst a world of tailored suits and bodyguards. Kareem, whose sketches filled with more longing than any of her husband's extravagant gifts. Kareem, who always seemed to see her beneath the perfect filter. Their first collision had been accidental. Weeks earlier, Layla, hiding in her own home, desperate for air. Kareem sketching the palm garden by the pool, headphones draped around his neck. Small talk blossomed where silence had festered for months. They compared stories: her startup grind, his expulsion from London's art school, the way both owed every luxury to a man they barely knew but could never truly escape. It was only after midnight, when the windows fogged with humidity, that Layla sent Kareem the first coded text. "Room 2103. If you're up." His answer, a brushstroke emoji, felt like a rescue. Away from surveillance cameras and trusted household staff, they talked, truly talked for the first time. About exile and inheritance, about dreams, about the suffocating ritual of being watched by everyone and trusted by no one. The freedom was addictive, reckless. They joked about deleting their footprints, shared playlists, learned the rhythm of encrypted messages. It was more intoxicating than any rooftop champagne poured for paparazzi. Over weeks, their meetings became routine necessity. Kareem rented a plain apartment in the New City Walk Towers, an anonymous box with blackout curtains and nothing on the walls except his graphite sketches. There, Layla wasn't the billionaire's wife, but a young woman with messy hair and dreams of leaving everything behind. Clothes fell to the floor as easily as the masks they wore at home. The sex was fierce, the confessions fiercer, each trusting the other with secrets that would be death sentences if overheard. Still, neither of them believed it could last. Every apartment corridor was a gauntlet. Their calls were coded, constantly deleted. But even the best encryption couldn't fence out prying eyes forever. One afternoon, returning to Kareem's hideaway, Layla noticed a new tenant. Silent, sunglasses indoors, earpiece just visible. She told herself it was paranoia, but her heart hammered. At a family dinner, 2 days later, Omar smiled tightly as staff presented a caramel cake for Kareem's birthday. "My son," he announced, "may your year bring you wisdom and loyalty." The words lingered, Ominous. Layla felt her phone buzz on her thigh. A message from Kareem. Picture of the cake, captioned, "Golden cages have gold keys." She choked out a laugh, trembling. Soon after, Omar's questions became more pointed. "Where do you go in the afternoons, Layla?" Soft, but the softness of a man who built skyscrapers. "Shopping," she lied. He nodded, but his eyes never really blinked. An argument spiraled after another forced charity event. Layla, pleading for independence, work, travel, anything beyond the routine. Omar, cool but firm, dismissing her dramatics with a flick of the wrist. Kareem, listening from the hallway, made himself invisible. But as Omar left the room, he laid a hand on Kareem's shoulder. "You're smart. Don't forget where your future comes from." Under neon city lights, Layla met Kareem again at the safe house, both of them nerves wrapped in silk and desperation. They planned to run, cryptocurrency stashed, new IDs whispered by midnight hackers, hope stitched together by fear. "You really think we'll make it out?" Kareem asked, voice barely a whisper. Her yes was a gasp. But outside, the world pressed close. Omar's men followed quietly, faces calm as mirrors, ears sharper than an alarm. Surveillance logs filled with elevator pings, security feeds, the timestamps of every door opened after midnight. The night before everything broke, Layla stared at her own reflection. Makeup washed away, rings left in a bowl, wondering if this face was still hers. In those final quiet hours, she sent Kareem their last encrypted message. "Tomorrow. Are you ready?" But tomorrow would not mean freedom. It would mean reckoning. And in a city built on gold, glass, and secrets, love was about to become lethal, no matter how quietly you try to run. The dawn crept reluctantly over Dubai Marina, casting an orange-pink glow across the endless glass and steel towers. But inside the Ramani Al Fayed penthouse, the morning brought no warmth. Layla awoke in the oversized, sterile bedroom, the sheets tangled around her like the lies she had been living. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the bedside table. Messages from Kareem, encrypted and urgent. Messages from unknown contacts offering traces of opportunity or warning. Messages from friends who'd noticed her retreat. Each sound was a reminder that none of her escapes were secret anymore. She sat up slowly, drawing in the sharp scent of Arabian oud that filled the room, clashing with the sour taste of anxiety in her mouth. The city outside, sunlit and glittering, looked more like an endless jeweled prison than the promise of freedom anyone envied. She'd once pictured herself as a queen of this empire. Now she was just another trapped piece in a family game, never truly safe. The previous night's adrenaline, their whispered plans, the rule-breaking hunger, had faded into exhaustion. Kareem was supposed to be at his university art studio, but he'd called twice before dawn, his voice rough and uncertain. Their meticulously outlined plan to vanish. Cryptocurrency hidden across a dozen anonymous wallets, new passports folded inside a hollowed-out book, coded contacts waiting in faraway places, suddenly felt heartbreakingly fragile. Downstairs, Omar Al Fayed was already hosting another of his famous breakfasts for Dubai's dealmakers. His laughter echoed off marble while he made promises and struck bargains. But his eyes scanned the security screens, the shadows and corners, the footfalls of people he trusted least, including his own wife and son. Every move in the penthouse was watched, every gesture subtly recorded by staff trained in loyalty and discretion. Layla knew Omar's surveillance was a velvet noose, tightening after every tiny infraction. Her world was shrinking. Every secret meeting, every encrypted message, every smile that lasted a second too long. She and Kareem had become careful, rarely seeing one another in the penthouse. Their connection lived in code, in implication, passed between locked screens and prearranged silences. Their only real refuge was Kareem's tiny city walk apartment. Here, thick blackout curtains blotted out the city, and their fevered plans took shape. Maps of Greece, Morocco, and Bali lay scattered on the floor, mixed with flight itineraries they might never use and sketches of imaginary futures. Kareem, pale with nerves and longing, scribbled obsessively in his journal, a blend of art, hope, and desperation. In this room, neither was a billionaire's trophy. Both were simply young and afraid. clutching for agency in a world determined to arrange every detail of their lives. One day, Layla said softly, sitting cross-legged beside him after another long night of plotting, "This won't just be a story we survived. It'll be our own beginning." Kareem looked at her with a flicker of doubt and faith, replying only, "We have to go soon. If we wait, they'll take even this away from us." But outside their bubble, the walls were closing in. In private meetings, Omar's tone had shifted from cold dismissal to icy calculation. He convened with former intelligence operatives, hired digital forensics experts, doubled the number of discreet bodyguards trailing his family. He suspected rebellion. Though he didn't speak openly, he never needed to. His power lived in what was not said, in glances that lasted a beat too long, in the fact that people suddenly disappeared from their posts and were never mentioned again. That afternoon, Layla's stomach dropped when Omar's steely executive assistant appeared at her door, expression composed. "Mr. Al-Fayed would like a word." Now, there was no room for refusal. She walked through long corridors filled with gold-framed art and silent, impassive guards. Omar's private office was a glass box perched over the city, intimidating in its sheer emptiness. He regarded her without warmth or suspicion, just the measured calm of a man who believed every secret could be bought, sold, or crushed. "You betray more than me," Omar said quietly, fingers steepled, voice devoid of volume but weighted with consequence. "You endanger our family's future and Kareem's legacy." She wanted to look away, but didn't. "I am making choices for myself. For us. We're not property." A cold, bitter smile flickered and vanished on his lips. "Freedom? Don't confuse defiance with power, Layla. In this family, those who embarrass us never last long." For a moment violence hovered. Potential, but not yet acted upon. Omar didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Words here were sharper, more final than any threat of force. Layla walked back to her room shaken, the old confidence replaced by a deeper dread. The warning wasn't just for her. It was for Kareem too. That night, under Dubai's blade-like skyline and neon haze, she and Kareem met again at a safe room. They barely touched, knowing every sound could end them. Together, they mapped out desperate new escape plans, reconsidering routes, making new arrangements with shadowy fixers. Their timeline shrank. "Trust no one," they repeated. "Run sooner." But fate, they both sensed, was circling closer every hour. Shadows moved where there'd never been shadows before. An elevator paused on their floor too long. The concierge's eyes lingered a moment more than usual. Omar's men seemed to know where to look, when to listen. As the city's lights flickered in the darkness, Layla pressed her forehead to the window, and Kareem wrapped his arms around her shoulders. They understood that neither love nor money could freely buy them out of this prison, but that the price for their story, whatever it became, was about to be paid in full. Kareem lay back on the bare mattress, city sounds muffled by the blackout curtains, nerves jangling with every vibration from his phone. He could still feel Layla's breath on his cheek, the warmth of her desperate kiss hours before, each touch deeper, more urgent, haunted now by Omar's chilling words. "Those who embarrass us never last long." He replayed the warning over and over, his mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. What if they'd already waited too long? Layla had left his apartment just before sunrise, her hair tucked beneath a plain scarf, a duffel slung over her arm packed with cash, burner phones, and a single engraved bracelet. Omar's first wedding gift, now their ironic good luck charm. She'd promised she'd call by noon with instructions, new tickets, a new plan, a final confirmation that their desperate break would come tonight. Yet as midday faded into late afternoon, the silence from her line grew deafening. Anxiety clawed at Kareem as he scanned the flat. Notes and sketches from their dreamt-up future scattered around like confetti, a second passport tucked under the sink, passwords scrawled on cigarette wrappers. For all their planning, Kareem saw now how little control they truly had. Shadows fell longer in the room as calls from Layla went unanswered, and his hands began to shake as he tried in vain to reach her. Meanwhile, Layla paced the penthouse, her every step tracked by unseen eyes. Staff offered polite smiles, but in their glances, she sensed suspicion. After her fraught meeting with Omar the previous day, there were new rules. Her driver never left her side. Phone calls were abruptly cut off, and her movements traced by a silent house manager who never questioned, never blinked. Every room held mirrors and cameras. The world itself felt like a gilded cage snapping tight around her. Late that afternoon, Omar summoned both his wife and son for an impromptu family dinner, a rare event. "Call Kareem," the house manager instructed flatly. "Your father wishes you both present tonight." On time. Layla's heart thudded. Her hands were slick with dread. Kareem, hearing the message on his end, went cold, instinct warning him that something in the air had shifted, irrevocably. He arrived early, exchanging a tense glance with Layla in the foyer. Her smile was brittle, her hand trembling as she touched his sleeve, a touch hidden from security, yet loaded with meaning. "I tried to call," she whispered, eyes shining. "They kept my phone all day." Omar appeared, larger than life in his cuff-linked casuals, his smile the mask of an old predator. The staff served slow courses while the city glittered below. He spoke softly of business, charity, the importance of family heritage, but the undertone was steel. Kareem tried to eat, but his appetite was gone. The house was too quiet. The usual laughter, the background music, all carefully absent. At last, after dessert, Omar's smile faded. He gestured for the staff to leave. "Let's not pretend anymore," he said, voice flat and cold. "I know where you two have been. I know what you've done." Layla went white. Kareem sat stiff, every muscle prepared for flight or a blow. Omar slid an envelope across the table. "Photos, messages, transactions. I don't pay millions to be blind." His eyes flicked dangerously between them. "You believed you could outsmart me in my own house." Layla stammered, dam breaking after weeks of holding in fear. "Omar, it was never about you. She grasped for an explanation, some excuse, but he cut her off with a gesture. "My son," Omar continued, the endearment carrying only thread. "You have destroyed your future. And you," he turned to Layla, "you are done here. Tonight." Kareem's vision tunneled, adrenaline pounding. "What will you do?" he managed, voice barely audible. "You can't keep us prisoners forever." At first, Omar almost laughed, a cold, incredulous bark, then slammed his fist onto the table. "You both made your choice. Now you'll live with the consequences." The feeling in the house changed instantly. Staff melted away, locks clicked shut, and the security that had always lingered at the edge of comfort now became a clear, visible threat. Guards blocked every exit. Layla was ushered toward her suite under the pretense of needing rest. Kareem, denied even his phone, was marched to the guest rooms, the doors closed, men with earpieces stationed in the hallway. As night dragged on, Kareem lay awake, plotting one last escape. The plan was grim: scale down the servant staircase, make a run for the garage, hope Layla could do the same. Meanwhile, in her room, Layla lay with her duffel bag at her feet and a flashlight in her hand, waiting for any sign she could slip away. That moment came just before 2 a.m., when a power surge, a rare malfunction in the building's state-of-the-art system, plunged the apartment into semi-darkness. Doors were momentarily unlocked as the security team scrambled to restore cameras and lights. Layla took her chance, darting barefoot down the corridors, heart pounding as she nearly collided with Kareem at the far end of the main hallway. "Now," she whispered, grabbing his hand, the familiar heat between them burning through the terror. They dashed for the service stairwell, adrenaline lending supernatural speed. Down below, a guard spotted a flicker of movement and raised the alarm. Within seconds, the penthouse erupted. Lights snapped back on, shouted orders echoed, and the exits were locked. Kareem and Layla found themselves cornered at the basement level, a door to the garage barely open. One last hope. Omar himself appeared at the top of the stairs, flanked by 2 guards. He was unmasked now. No fatherly warmth, only raw betrayal and wrath. "You think you can run?" he called out, voice echoing. In that instant, everything, their love, their panic, their hope, collapsed into chaos. Omar gestured, and the guards surged forward. Kareem tried to shield Layla, shouting for help as fists flew and bodies crashed against the cold cement walls. In the struggle, something sharp flashed, a knife caught in the guard's hand, its arc wild amidst the blur of limbs. A cry, a gasp, blood blooming too fast on white linen. In the aftermath, The basement echoed with screams, footsteps, and the metallic whine of security alarms. By the time police arrived, two figures lay motionless in the dim garage light. One, the heir to a construction empire. The other, the wife whose love had been as dangerous as any secret Dubai could hold. Above them, Omar stood, stained, trembling, breathing hard for the first time in years. When the lights flickered on fully, the house that had built a dynasty now echoed with loss. The price of loyalty writ in blood. The city's oldest, richest family would never recover. And in the gold-lit darkness of Dubai, the only sound left was the siren's call for those who dared to want too much, paid too dearly, and shattered every rule ever written for love. The city of Dubai seemed to pulse beneath the Ramani Al Fayed Tower, but deep in the belly of the penthouse, time had stilled to the rhythm of dread. Sunlight was a memory replaced by harsh, artificial glow. The house's stillness was punctuated only by the static of radios and the shuffle of security guards at every doorway. The aftermath of that failed escape attempt lingered in every corner. Clothes abandoned in the stairwell, droplets of blood tracked through marble halls, and the heavy, muffled wailing from within Layla's quarters that the staff pretended not to hear. Word of the night's violence had been swept away with brutal efficiency. Police were not summoned. The bodies of Kareem's two loyal friends, part-time drivers, part-time decoys, were driven off silently in company vehicles, their families given fat envelopes and warned. All that remained was the continued, stifling sense that no one was ever really alone in this house. Layla and Kareem, battered and trembling, found themselves sequestered in locked bedrooms on opposite ends of the penthouse. Security teams changed every 6 hours, their faces impassive, the air thick with threat. Layla's world shrank to a view of the Persian Gulf from behind unbreakable glass. Her injuries throbbed, a bruise blooming under one eye, a split lip, stark reminders of both physical danger and how far she'd fallen from the girl in Instagram photos, all glamour and poise. She drifted in and out of anxious sleep, startled awake by phantom alarms and the memory of Omar's face at the moment of confrontation. Not rage, but a terrifying vacancy, as if he'd already calculated what her life, and Kareem's, were worth in this new game. Meanwhile, Kareem battered the walls of his gilded prison, bleeding from a gash across his knuckles, sick with guilt and fear. His phone had been confiscated, his laptop seized. For hours he sat at the edge of the gigantic guest bed, replaying every choice, every what if. When a new guard came to his door, Kareem pleaded for water, for a phone call, for a chance to explain. Each request met with firm, polite silence. It was Omar who eventually appeared, suit immaculate, eyes flat as quartz. "You had your chance," he murmured, standing just inside the doorway. "Family can forgive much, Kareem, but not betrayal. Not this." He paused, almost as if waiting for regret, but Kareem said nothing. The silence was an admission. The verdict had already been rendered. Omar leaned in close, voice soft. "You both will remain here as long as I decide. If you try to run again, neither the law nor your mother's memory will save you." Those words pressed an ancient ache into Kareem's chest. His mother's portrait hung in the hallway, a reminder that this man, his father, had once been gentle, had once believed in art, compassion, dreams. But that was another lifetime, one lost with his mother's early death and replaced by a machine built to win. For Layla, the hours dragged into a restless, haunted day. Servants slipped in and out, eyes lowered, never lingering long enough to exchange words. She propped her phone on the desk, watched the locked, no service icon, and tried to remember the taste of freedom. Her thoughts returned always to Kareem, the quiet intensity of his friendship, the way he looked at her, as if she were the world's last honest thing. Had she doomed them both? Did she ever really have a choice? As the evening descended like a velvet blade across the city, Omar reconvened in his private office, bringing both Layla and Kareem together for the first time since the failed escape. The guards stood at attention, the bodyguards outside the doors. The room was lit only by the shimmer of city lights and a single, swinging desk lamp that cast every shadow long and sinister. "Nobody's going anywhere," Omar began, his voice iron. "If you want forgiveness, You will do as I say. If you want freedom, his lips curled. You should have considered the cost before you disgraced this name. The tension was suffocating. Kareem's anger flared, but he held back, sensing the razor's edge. We are not property, father. You were family. Omar snapped, until you chose her over me. Layla, voice faint but steady, replied. We chose honesty over lies. It was a dangerous challenge, but Omar only laughed, low and cruel. Honesty? There's nothing honest about what you've done. Not to me. Not to Dubai. The only truth left for either of you is the price. That night, the city's lights seemed to dim for the Rahmani Al Fayed dynasty. In hidden rooms, contracts were adjusted, bodyguards dismissed, secrets buried. The word was sent out quietly to all of Omar's associates. Layla and Kareem were to remain under surveillance, their movements invisible to the world. But as the heat pressed in through triple-pane glass, and as both young lovers stared out over a city that had once promised the world, they understood blood would decide what words, love, and money had all failed to secure. And somewhere outside, among the towers and night markets, and 10 million secrets, fate was waiting to collect its due. The hours after Omar's ultimatum bled into a night thick with dread, the penthouse transformed from palace to prison. The silence was alive, humming with the thread of violence never far from the surface. Layla sat beside the window, the lights of Dubai dazzling the darkness like false hope. Her hand trembled as she traced the edge of her duffel bag, its contents now pointless. Burner phones with no service, money that could not purchase escape, passports whose destinations might as well have been another planet. Across the hallway, Kareem lay awake, face swollen, knuckles split. The previous day's confrontation echoed in his head. The look of rejection in his father's eyes, the taste of blood in his mouth, the humiliation of being dragged away by men once paid to protect him. He'd thought love could be their ticket out, that courage would shatter the centuries-old cage. Yet all it had truly done was mark both him and Layla as traitors in a world where loyalty meant everything and forgiveness nothing. As midnight approached, the house thinned to whispers. Guards changed shifts in pairs, keys jingling, doors glancing open, then snapping shut. In the kitchen, servants moved as quietly as shadows, barely speaking. Everyone knew something was ending, though no one dared name it. It was Layla who made the next move, the only move left to make. All evening, she watched patterns, where security stood longest, when power flickered, how vents hummed before the generator kicked in. She waited for the change in air pressure, the subtle vibration in glass when the main security system reset. 2:42 a.m. Like clockwork, the tower ran a silent diagnostic sweep. She'd marked this each night for weeks. Now she pressed the advantage, slipping out of her room, duffel tied in hand, feet silent along marble. At the same moment, a door down the hall clicked. Kareem, gaunt and desperate, was thinking the same thing. They collided mid-corridor, surprise swallowed by necessity. Layla grabbed his wrist and whispered, "Now or never." Together they slipped past the laundry rooms, ducked as a lone guard checked his phone, and sprinted, barefoot, into the staff stairwell. The echo of their frantic breaths and racing hearts was the only sign of life as they descended, floor by floor, toward the underground garage, the only route not locked from the inside. But Omar knew his house and his enemies. Even as the lovers reached the last landing, the harsh white light of the generator snapped on, illuminating the steel doors. 3 guards blocked the exit, armed and tense. Behind them, Omar himself appeared, his face unreadable, a pistol loose and silent in his right hand. He did not yell. He spoke quietly, each word more chilling for its calm. "I told you there was nowhere left to run." Kareem stepped in front of Layla, arms wide, voice trembling but strong. "Let her go. This ends with me." Omar's eyes glittered, a storm of pain, pride, fury, and something older, betrayal by blood. "After what you've done, after what you've made my name mean." He turned the gun in his hand, weighing centuries of lineage over a single, shattering affair. The next minutes unspooled in chaos, as if time itself rebelled against the ending. Layla pleaded, voice hoarse, cracked. "Please let us go. It's over, Omar. We won't come back." Kareem moved as if to reach for the weapon, but a guard stepped forward, grabbing his shoulder. There was shouting, a struggle, hands in motion too fast and desperate. A shot rang out, impossibly loud in the underground quiet. Kareem crumpled, eyes still locked on Layla's, his body folding like paper in her grasp. Blood bloomed on his pale shirt, dark and final. Layla screamed, falling to her knees, hands pressing uselessly to the wound, as if love alone could stall death. But there was no help, just the thick concreteness of loss. The silence, afterward somehow heavier than the gunshot itself. Omar staggered, horror and rage mixing in his gaze. A single tear slid down his cheek, anger for what he'd become, for the empire he'd built gutted by secrets. Layla stared up at him, not in fear, but in accusation. "You did this," she whispered, voice rasping through tears. "Not us. You killed your son." Before she, or anyone, could move, before the guards could process what they'd seen, Layla reached for Kareem's fallen blade. It flashed, there in the blue-black light. The blade that had once been their imagined salvation. She drove it deep in her own abdomen, collapsed sudden and silent, her last breath leaving a trail of defiance on the cold cement floor beside Kareem. In minutes, it was over. The scene that greeted the first outside responders. A pair of bodies, entwined in doomed escape, a billionaire slumped to his knees soaked in their blood, would fuel headlines for years. The official story was sanitized, covered in platitudes of grief and tragedy. The truth, as ever, was buried amongst Dubai's glass towers, whispered about only in hushed tones. That even the richest are not immune from fate and folly, that in golden cages, the most forbidden things are not always love, but freedom. In the aftermath, Omar's dynasty fractured. Investors disappeared. Friends distanced themselves, not wishing to be associated with scandal. Social media buzzed, and then fell silent, too unnerved to process a story that felt at once cinematic and utterly real. For those who'd watched Layla's rise on their screens, the girl who had everything, only one lesson echoed. There is always a price for secrets, and sometimes it is paid in the currency of blood. And so high above a city built on ambition and guarded tradition, 2 young lives, once promised the world, vanished into legend, a tragedy written not in gold, but in loss, love, and the darkness luxury can never conceal.